This kind of ties into the question about why we're only at 6% of females in the industry. The first moment was when I was flying with Carver Seaplanes and I was helping a lady get off of the flight. And she was of an older generation and she was very sweet. And she didn't know me, but she took the time to tell me that she was very proud of me for being a pilot because she didn't have that opportunity when she was my age. And that will always stick with me. Another moment was a more recent moment. For those people that know me, the spotlight isn't my thing. I feel very grateful for getting to do my essential dream job on the show. I didn't realize that now little ones are getting to watch the show, which is really cool. And seeing that there's a female pilot, and there was a little girl that I met, and she's 7, and now she wants to become a pilot, and she didn't know that was even possible before watching me on the show. So if we get to inspire a few little ones to join us in the industry, then that's pretty dang cool.
I'm Peter McCully. That's Jessica James, commercial pilot and high-flying member of the cast of the TV show Lost Car Rescue. We'll chat when Today in BC continues.
Hey, it's the Moj, Bob Marjanovic. Join me on the Moj on Sports podcast on Black Press Media at todayinbc.com. Listen into conversations with well-known athletes and celebrities as we look behind the scenes at these successful people. Listen in to the Moj on Sports podcast on todayinbc.com. You'll also find the Moj on Sports podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, YouTube, and Google Podcasts, as well as mojonsports.com.
Thanks for joining us on the podcast today, Jess.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You were introduced to small planes at an early age while growing up in Nimpo Lake, which I understand is the float plane capital of British Columbia. There must be a pretty good story there.
I have to report, unfortunately, it's no longer the capital of BC, but for quite a few years, it did get to hold that title, which is very special for the community. But yes, I feel very grateful for being able to grow up in a northern town. Getting to hear float planes take off on a regular basis right by my home was just a regular occurrence. Very grateful that I got to grow up surrounded by bush pilots. One of my favorite pastimes growing up was learning all of their bush pilot stories. So it definitely started at a very young age.
Was there one story that stuck with you through the years?
Goodness. You know what? I think there was a lot of stories growing up, stories that have made me a pilot today, just learning how to respect the weather, learning little tricks and tips if you ever get yourself in a little bit of an unsafe situation. And also to just realizing how important it is to have that aviation family. And it is really truly a family, and learning that the world is very small. I guess just learning little anecdotes throughout my whole childhood and then carrying that with me throughout my career.
Let's go back to the start. I know that you met Matt Sager from the show on Vancouver Island while you were both going to flight school.
That's correct, yes. Back in, 2012, that's where we met. We were both working on our private pilot's license at the Victoria Flying Club in Victoria. The rest is history. Now we've been friends for a very long time, close to 11 years now. You know what, if you would have told me when I first met him, both of us waiting for our flights in the lobby area, that we would both be on a TV show, fast forward a few years, I would have probably thought you were crazy, but it's just really neat to look back and see that now we're both on TV getting to do something very cool. And I firmly believe that right place, right time, and everything happens for a reason.
You obtained your private pilot's license when you were just 19. So what's involved in obtaining your license?
Firstly, they recommend that you go get an aviation medical. That's the only way that you can be a pilot, is if you are able to hold that medical. If you're unable, then unfortunately, you're unable to have a current license. So step 1 is getting that medical. Step 2 is you get to sign up for ground school. You also get to go on a discovery flight, which now that I'm done all my training, us pilots laugh and joke about that it's the cheapest flight that you'll ever take, just because those schools like to give you that cheap flight so that you can fall in love with it, because it's pretty easy to fall in love with it. And then got to start paying the big bills for the fuel and the aircraft cost and rental fees and all that stuff. I would say that 9 out of 10 times the person in the plane comes down and wants to become a pilot. And then you start doing your flight training. So during your flight training, there's multiple things that we learn: how to deal with emergencies and different attitudes of flight, landing, taking off, cross country, GPS usage. And there's very special milestones along the way. You get to do your first solo, which is one flight that you'll always remember. And then along the way, you need to do a flight test and a written exam with Transport Canada. Usually it's about 45 to 50 hours to get your private pilot's license, and that's the first step. It's very expensive. When I was going to school, it was about 10,000. I think it's actually close to 20,000 now to get your private pilot's license. It's actually very hard to get funding for school because some flight schools aren't accredited with the government, so it's not acknowledged as actually going to school. So it's very hard for students to get student loans. So with that, it takes people a little bit longer. You could get your private pilot's license as in short as 3 months if you were working at kind of an 8 to 5 job, Monday to Friday. But because it is expensive, it usually takes people about a year to do it because they're working full time while doing it.
And you took the next step and became licensed as a commercial pilot for about the last 6 years or so. What kind of planes do you fly, and do you have a favorite?
So when I was flying commercial, I was flying for a company called Harbour Air Seaplanes that's primarily based out of Vancouver. And I was flying their Twin Otter, which is to date probably my favorite aircraft. It's a beautiful machine. Its performance is outstanding, and it's just super fun to learn to fly and to fly. With saying that, though, I can't forget about sweet Stella Stinson that I get to fly on the show. Different skill set that I've had to learn and continually learning and enjoying, and getting to fly the Stinson on the show as well as just 2 different machines and get to exercise both sides of my flying skills. I'd have to say the Stinson and the Twin Otter are my favorite.
There must be unique challenges of flying a float plane compared to flying a more traditional land-based aircraft.
There's elements you maybe not necessarily think about right away, but your runway is constantly moving, essentially. So we've got water that we have to learn how to read. You sometimes have swells that you have to deal with depending on where you're landing. If you're landing in the ocean, they can be pretty big swells. You've also got people as well, like boaters and paddle boaters. When I was landing in downtown Vancouver during the summertime, you're definitely having to keep your eyes constantly moving because you're looking for boaters and kayakers and canoers and people coming out of every direction. Also, too, with flying floats, you're landing probably in more difficult areas than you would with a land aircraft. So there's things to consider. And then also water as well. A lot of people think that glassy water would be our friend as float pilots when it's actually not. We want a little bit of texture to that water. When it is glassy, then you don't have any perception to how high up you are for when you're coming into a landing. I guess to go back to one of your questions about what did I learn from the bush pilots growing up was always be in control of your aircraft until it's either tied up at the dock or tied up on the apron. Even though you're on the ground or on the water and you've landed, you're not done flying. Sometimes that's when situations can happen. Maybe you let loose a little bit and you're like, oh, okay, we've landed, we're good. But no, you're still in control of that aircraft.
I must say, I've never considered myself a great flyer. I don't like big jets. But having lived in the Gulf Islands for 15 years and taken that very same Harbour Air flight to the downtown harbor area from Ganges, I always compared it to being in a sports car. It was fun.
Totally. I love the Single Otter and the Twin Otter. Their performance is just amazing. And I'll never forget my first flight in a Single Otter where I was just like amazed at its performance. They can haul a lot of people and a lot of cargo. That's what they were made for. But their performance is outstanding on how short of a distance they can get off the water.
I always enjoyed the fact that it was like 25 minutes from Ganges to downtown Vancouver. And if I hopped on the ferry, it was going to be 7 or 8 hours.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's nice that they have that service. I've done that flight as well from Ganges to downtown. It's very convenient and it's a great service to offer the lower mainland and coast.
What's, let's say, the most non-traditional cargo you've ever flown and where?
That's an easy one. When I was flying for Harbour Air Seaplanes, we actually had an agreement with the BC Transplant, and we would get to fly over organs. A lot of it would be eye tissue from point A to point B. So I would fly that from downtown Victoria to downtown Vancouver a lot, which was very rewarding. I also have my paramedic license, so I'm a bit of a medical nerd at times. So it was pretty cool to be able to combine the two a bit. I would have to say, hands down, that would be my most interesting cargo item.
In the show, you mentioned the 1948 Stinson tail dragger that you fly. When I read that it was older than you and Matt put together, I thought, now this plane is either in exceptional condition or planes last a lot longer than the cars and trucks you're looking for.
Both. Sweet Stella Stinson was actually found in Atlin, BC by Matt and one of our close family friends / family member. And so they brought the Stinson down from Atlin to Nanaimo. And then Matt and one of his very close friends, who's a aviation mechanic, actually took apart the Stinson from head to toe, just like a car. They redid it. Met with the engineer, redid and designed the cockpit panel, and she got new radios, she got a new prop. Great thing about flying for Matt is that I can definitely know that I can trust his plane. He's very particular about the safety of his plane and his vehicles. With knowing that, I know that he went through from head to toe with the engineer and that everything was fixed that needed to be fixed, or it was purchased new and put into the Stinson. I'm an old soul at heart, so one of the things I do love about aviation is that it hasn't changed much over the years, which is pretty cool. I feel like in this world that we're in, everything's constantly changing. There's the new iPhone, new laptop, everything, new vehicles. And the thing with planes, besides, of course, we're not navigating off of stars now, we're navigating off of GPSs, which makes it a lot easier. But the bare bones of the plane and theory of flight haven't changed, which is pretty cool. Those aircraft from 1948 were still able to fly, and they're still doing a really good job in keeping us safe in the air.
When they show on the show, you and Matt in the cockpit together with that little dash cam camera, it looks pretty tight in there. How do you and Matt get along in the cockpit?
You know what? It helps getting to fly with your best friend. I have to say, the whole team on Lost Car Rescue, on screen and behind the scenes, it feels like a family, and we're so lucky that we get to say that. It definitely feels like we're at summer camp all summer, and then we go home and it's a bit of a withdrawal because you're like, wait, I just got to hang out with my best friend all day. Now I'm home, back to regular life, I guess, and it is a bit tough. Definitely close quarters. We spend long days together, the whole team. It makes it a lot easier that we do get along, and it's nice. I feel very grateful. I've known the Sagers for over 11 years now, and it makes my job a lot easier.
I read somewhere that only 6% of private pilots in Canada are women. Why do you suppose that is?
I think there's a few different factors. I think that it honestly starts from us being young, little ones, not knowing that they can be a pilot. I was chatting with one of my very close friends recently, and her little one is 5, and she was very proud, and she went to school to tell her friends that her mom is a pilot. She unfortunately was told that she was a liar because moms can't be pilots, it's only dads. This is 2023, and that's still being told, which breaks my heart because that's not the case. Whoever you are and what gender you are doesn't eliminate you from getting to follow your dreams. I think it's important for us to just start at the basics and to show our younger generations that nothing will hold you back depending on who you are for race, color, or gender, that you can do anything that you set your mind to. You know, we're constantly evolving as a population and things are getting better, but there are still areas that we need to work and improve on. And I think it's just communicating that you can be a pilot if you are a female.
When Today in BC continues, Jessica James talks about Season 2 of Lost Car Rescue.
Why spend hours searching dealerships, comparing makes and models? Find the best of BC's inventory in one place, todaysdrive.com. You'll have access to inventory across BC, where you can easily find a vehicle that fits your needs and gets you where you need to go in comfort. Get in the driver's seat. Don't miss out on the many options we have available for you. Powered by Black Press Media, todaysdrive.com connects you with exclusive new and used car deals.
Today in BC is a Black Press Media podcast. I'm Peter McCully. For the past few years, Jess, you've been working with Matt and the crew from Lost Car Rescue, flying over remote areas of BC and the prairies, scouting for classic vehicles that have been abandoned. It looks like a lot of fun. Do you have a favorite area to fly over and around, and why?
My favorite area, I would have to say, would be the prairies. It's just absolutely gorgeous. I feel like it's a little hidden gem of Canada that sometimes gets forgotten. Getting to fly over fields and fields of golden wheat was just absolutely beautiful and breathtaking. But to be completely honest, the really cool things about this job is that I get to fly in some really neat places and places I would have never visited in Canada if it wasn't for the show. So I just try and stay present in all of those places that it leads me. And I guess my favorite place continually changes. When I was flying floats along the coast, that also leads you to some pretty beautiful places. If you're from the Gulf Islands, little nooks and crannies, getting to see whales along my flights, and I feel very grateful for where it's taken me.
I was always amazed at flying over the prairies or driving through the prairies on the right day with the sun at the right angle and the wind. It looks like the ocean.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's just absolutely gorgeous. I just can't say enough. I feel like the prairies do get do get forgotten, and they shouldn't, because it's just absolutely beautiful.
On season 1, you found a few vehicles on your own, much to Matt's chagrin. Are you a bit of a car nut, or is this all part of the learning curve?
All part of the learning curve. I feel our world and the aviation world are very much the same with its people. And I love that family aspect. I love learning from Matt and Dave, both very knowledgeable humans. And I hope that I can maybe remember a quarter of what they know, and I'll feel pretty grateful for that. I can't call myself a car nut, but I do love it. I love constantly learning all of the fun facts. And I feel grateful that I've got Matt and Dave as my kind of walking encyclopedias about all the cars that we encounter. I'm definitely getting the bug.
On the show, it's pretty obvious to me that you have the gift of connecting with people, and it's paid off a few times when you're searching for owners of vehicles.
I think I have to owe that to growing up in a small town. I'm able to relate to a lot of the people that we are flying to and hunting for cars for. I grew up in a town of, in the summertime, it was a population of 400, and in the winter it was 200. It's definitely in my bones and in my roots. Yeah, I take pride in just being able to chat with anyone, and I just thoroughly enjoy it as well. I get to learn so many amazing things about the people that we encounter and learn their stories, and I think that's really important.
How do you approach the task of locating lost or abandoned vehicles in remote locations from the air?
When I first started this journey, Matt would joke and say that the cars talk to him and lead him in different places. And I was like, okay, sure. And then you get it. You totally get it. There's been so many times where I'm like, you know what? I feel like we just need to go left. Something's pulling me to this direction. We probably sound like crazy car people, but sure enough, like 9 out of 10 times you go to that left and something's pulling you towards there and you find that gem of a car. Also just doing grid work. A lot of it, Matt and I joke that our next jobs, I hope I get to do this job for a very long time, but something to maybe do on the side would be search and rescue, because we are just flying plotted lines. It can get very tiresome, but you're constantly keeping your eyes on the go. And then once we do find something, it's taking it back to the basics, which is, I love being an old soul. I've gotten to flip through a few phone books and just chatting with neighbors and doing the old school way, which is really cool.
And it's fun when you find a connection.
Oh my goodness. And you know what? It's so weird. It's happened several times. As everyone got to see in season 1, it happened when we were looking for that Dodge Dart, but it even happened this season as well, where I was chatting with someone and their neighbor had family friends from Williams Lake, and it turned out to be one of my late grandpa's bestie's daughter. I love that type of stuff too. It just gets me very excited. The world is small.
Very small. Getting smaller. Can you give us an idea of where the team is geographically hunting for vehicles on season 2?
Yes, I can very proudly say that this is the farthest I've ever flown. We made our way all the way east to Ontario for part of season 2. And then we were back in our kind of old stomping grounds in Alberta, in a new area in Alberta. But it was pretty cool. We got to fly to a very beautiful area in Ontario.
Is there a particular vehicle you spotted from the air that you can share with us that made it to the show and eventually made its way to a buyer?
I'm going to have to say that you're going to have to stay tuned for season 2. But we're saying that we found some very amazing cars, some that even surprised us as avid car hunters. I can say full-heartedly that season 2 is going to be a good one.
I like to ask this question to folks on the podcast who have been traveling far and wide throughout British Columbia and now the prairies and now Ontario, because I always find a new place to eat. Do you have a favorite diner, drive-in, or dive?
I do. This one is Hungry Herbie's in Cache Creek. Without hesitation. It's a tradition whenever I'm driving through. It started with driving through with my mom. We'd have to stop at Hungry Herbie's. And now as an adult, every time I drive through, I got to stop.
I'm going to ask the great Google about that as soon as we're done here. Jess, you've had camera crews following you around twice. How long does all of this take? How many weeks or months are we out looking for vehicles?
We usually start in May, and then depending on scheduling with our TV crew and the cast, usually it takes us about to August, but this year we actually went a little bit later in the season and we actually had to film until October. It happens in little bites just so everybody can have a bit of a recharge and go home and get all fueled up again to go back out there with our boots hitting the ground.
Looking back on your very young career to date, what stands out as the most memorable or most impactful so far?
I've had two moments, and this kind of ties into the question about why we're only at 6%, unfortunately, of females in the industry. The first moment was when I was flying with Harbour Seaplanes, and I was helping a lady get off of the flight, and she was of an older generation, and she was very sweet. And she didn't know me, but she took the time to tell me that she was very proud of me for being a pilot because she didn't have that opportunity when she was my age. And that will always stick with me. I can tell you exactly where I was standing when she told me that. Another moment was a more recent moment. For those people that know me, the spotlight isn't my thing. I feel very grateful for getting to do my sensual dream job on the show. I didn't realize that was the biggest surprise with this show is how now little ones are getting to watch the show, which is really cool. And seeing that there's a female pilot, and there was a little girl that I met, she's 7, and now she wants to become a pilot, and she didn't know that was even possible before watching me on the show. So if we get to inspire a few little ones to join us in the industry, then that's pretty dang cool.
What advice would you give to someone, Jess, interested in pursuing a career as a float plane pilot?
I think my biggest piece of advice is just the aviation world is very small. Yeah, just like the world itself, but aviation world is even smaller. Always show up being your best and trying your hardest. It's a job that you're constantly learning, and that's what keeps you alive and keeps you safe, is just constantly learning, taking the time to do that, and knowing that some days it will be hard in the industry, but if it's something that you love, just work through those hard days, and there's going to be days where it's going to be absolutely amazing and you're going to be like, this is why I'm doing this.
I'd like to thank Jessica James for being with us on this edition of Today in BC. If you have suggestions or comments, send a voice message to podcast@blackpress.ca. You may be part of our podcast mailbag segment. You'll find Today in BC podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, and Google Podcasts.